sustainability, a keyword that I think you already heard a lot in the introduction, and of course, a reduction of congestion. There are a couple of numbers that in this, I think this is not, there are a couple of numbers that show how this is actually happening. This is happening, and this is not just a futuristic future. The future starts now. The fundraising is already at 6.8 billion. There are 600 startups in the advanced air mobility sector, 200 projects already, concept already developed. And it is the orders have went, let's say, beyond the 6,500 in the 2021. So many players, many companies across the world are betting hard and on the advanced air mobility. We have today an amazing panel that will help discuss about it. That these are all leaders that are shaping this sector, this innovative sector. I will start from my left. Captain Suleiman Al-Mohamedi is responsible in GACA for safety standard and for sustainability and environment. We have Patrick Chartrand, which is the managing of HECO, is one innovative venture of CIO. It's one of the global technology leaders. They are leader in the operating aircraft mobility systems. Eric Cotet is the CEO of Jean Mobility, one of the leader manufacturer of eVTOLs. He has a multi-year experience in engineering and manufacturing, and has worked already in the Bombardier before. Sylvain Ducat. Sylvain Ducat is a fellow planner of Biports, one of the leaders in the vertiport design, building, and operation. He has also a former experience as urban planner, which we will see is quite relevant in this domain. Michael Diamond is the managing of a partner of Next Capital Partners, investment banking and financial advisor in the advanced air mobility. Their study and economic model are a reference in the sector. They are supporting, just to give an idea, Biports in a large funding in the sector. Then we have Arnaud Martinez, the CEO of the helicopter company, the local helicopter operator in Saudi. He has more than 20 years of experience in the general aviation. He has covered managerial roles in all, I think, the segment that we can imagine. and then just to finish, thank you for being here, Ken Stewart is from New Air. New Air is a no-profit organization leading in operation of advanced air mobility. They are designated from FAA for the unmanned systems, and he is actually the one that will tell us on how all the components and the operation will be integrated. In the 1 hour time that we have, I would like to cover the ecosystem of the advanced air mobility. I think what is important is really to capture how, in order to be successful, all the component needs to be all coordinated and all integrated. We will use this framework that will first go along the business case, demand, supply, but most importantly, the economic development. And then we will tackle with our panel a little bit the enablers, like the infrastructure, the financing, the technology. I will start probably with Arnaud, that he's the CEO of a company already operating in the kingdom, traditional business. He has created from scratch this company with an ambitious plan. And I would ask him how the advanced air mobility is affecting his plan, how they are planning to cope with it. It's a menace, it's a threat, or this is an opportunity?
So So thank you for asking the question, but definitely it's an opportunity. We cannot see that as a threat. We are a new company, 3 years, as you said, 3 years' time. So we have as you said, we started from scratch. So we have the opportunity to build with a phasing approach. It will be a journey. So it's a fantastic opportunity to plan for it. We started 3 years ago. It's an opportunity because we can start with the right platform. As I said, it's a journey. So we start with helicopters, new technology. We focus on the engine, the gas emission footprints. Sustainability will be part of the journey as well. So we have the opportunity to develop our relation with our authority, which is a massive key stakeholder of that advanced air mobility as well. So we are learning from our 3 years. Since 3 years, we are learning how, from many challenges that we face commonly with the authority as well, and on the regulation side and everything. So in the meantime, it's an opportunity as well because we are 100% owned by PIF. And PIF is a key enabler for the Saudi Vision 2030. So the objective has been set. The question is not if, the question is by when we will be reaching that arrival line.
Thank you, Arnaud. But do you think that advanced, these eVTOLs are a competitor of helicopter or not?
It's an endless discussion about, that was the same discussion between drones and helicopters. For me, it's a complement, right? We cannot, that's the future. We cannot be scared about the future. We need to plan for it. And that needs to be planned in the present. That needs to be planned from now. So in our case, we invested a lot in the right platform just to focus on the right technology right at the beginning. This is a chance because we are new. We don't have all this also DNA to change. It's new also for the industry, for the ecosystem. When we talk about GACA, I don't have to fight against the authority because of the huge legacy. Its rotary is something new for everyone, including with Captain Suleiman and GACA. So we can put everyone around the same table and plan for it. So it's definitely not a threat. It's definitely a complement.
That's great to hear. So actually, no legacy could be an opportunity for Saudi that is shaping a so ambitious aviation sector. And Eric, you are a new entrant, an innovative company that is on the advanced air mobility. So should we expect, since there is this complementarity, an intensification of partnership between new entrants and existing players, airline, even airports? I think we all see that this is happening.
Yes. So actually, just to come back to the previous question, which makes a link with it, I think that I would see a helicopter as being like buses and trucks. The eVTOL in the short term will be more as passenger car, so electric car. So they are complementary to each other. The payload and the distances that we will be able to achieve will be for the next decade really short, and the payload will be really minimal. So I think that they are complementary. So, but that still makes it, operators as potential partners. The usage of our aircraft is dual. So we would first start as, probably parcel delivery. So the UPS, FedEx, and all that. And we would also we have a modular configuration when we take the seats off, and we can have passenger during the day and parcel delivery during the night, for example. So that brings a lot of potential partnership. OEMs, as we know them, the bigger players like Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier. I think that, and I've been working at Bombardier for many years, and I know even if these are good companies, the agility to be able to start from scratch, from a clean sheet and come with an eVTOL is a big challenge. So at the end, I think that most of the smaller companies will probably get into some kind of relation where they would contribute and probably some, buyback or whatever. But I think that there are a lot of potential synergy related to that.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Looking at it more on the macroeconomic let's say, dimension. Patrick, I know with the CIA you are collaborating with the government of Quebec and Canada. And part of this huge investment that you are planning in this project is about the development of capabilities, training, and the new. Can you tell more? Because I think it's quite an important aspect for the vision of Saudi to know how the advanced air mobility can contribute to the economic development of the kingdom.
Yes, definitely. So, a quick word about CAE. We've been there 75 years. We're considered the worldwide partner of choice for training and in context of immersive situations. So we build simulators, we build training programs, and we are fully aware of the shortage of current pilots in civil aviation and business aviations. And we are expecting also an important demand for pilots for eVTOL devices. So we are putting in place the various technologies to actually allow that. And for that reason, the Quebec government has invested $1 billion, so $1 billion over 5 years, to help us out in developing that sector, that specialty sector of training eVTOL pilots across the world.
Yeah, yeah. So pilot will be one of the potential bottlenecks, and the capabilities is crucial.
It is, yes.
Getting back to you, Eric, on starting to look a little bit more on the enablement of this ecosystem, the technology, even the more prudent, let's say, projection. We have done some simulations. In the 2040, we could have 200,000 passenger eVTOL flying over city, which is 7 times the number of helicopters. It's a lot of aircraft. Are the O&M ready for scaling up the right capacity with the competitive cost in a model that is somehow similar to the automotive one? Where do you stand as an O&M on this?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, in the last decades and a bit more, we've seen a lot of companies moving from the traditional way of building aircraft to composite. And in our case, we're moving away from the typical composite to thermoplastic. I think we need to be able to reach some, you know, very high number of delivery per year. So we will go with the technology that will eventually be on larger aircraft. You know, again, Airbus, Boeing, everybody is looking for thermoplastic, but this is used mainly in the secondary structures. So primary structure is where we're going to be looking for, what we're going to be looking for to be able to produce hundreds and hundreds of aircraft and units. So it's going to be, you know, pure compression molding of composite or thermoplastic resin with the carbon fiber matrix. So anyway, I think that, you know, we need to see this. It's not traditional aerospace, where it's closer, like you just mentioned, to automotive, but with the security and safety level that, you know, aerospace has been used to. So it's really an hybrid, and we've never been to that. But I think that the technology is there. Thermoplastic, for example, is not used today because of pressurization and high altitude. These aircraft will fly very not very high without any pressurization. So we can introduce, and this is a good test bench to promote new technologies. But even if these are, you know, small aircraft, they will be fly-by-wire. They will have, you know, all the glass cockpit, everything that, you know, is found on a latest and greatest generation of aircraft.
Thank you, Eric. And then it's good to see that there is much more than not just the batteries that everybody is talking about when it comes to technology. And in this sense, probably can tell us even more, because in addition to the aircraft, there is one layer of technology that needs to enable all this ecosystem, which is quite sophisticated, and where all the safety and all the acceptance maybe depends. You, with your company, you are specialized in integrating the air traffic control with digital solution for this advanced air mobility.
Exactly. We focus very much on the associated elements, everything kind of beyond the aircraft. So radar systems, ground-based sensing, um, weather under 400 feet, all the things that are really important to making the whole ecosystem safe. And we do that by digitizing all that. We run a 80-kilometer corridor that you can fly unmanned aircraft 80 kilometers beyond visual line of sight. And that's fully integrated into the airspace. We operate out of an airport in North America. We're an FAA designated site. And so what we do is we digitize kind of those three aspects. It has to meet the 10 to the negative ninth safety that the FAA needs. It needs all the technology, which is a new world. When we talk about evolution, today most of our ATM is on-prem, local loop, or private loop. All of this in the future is all federated, much like the internet. Where do you get your data from? And has to have this kind of autonomous, trusted framework that you have to build this into. So that's really where we put the focus on. We look at the aircraft that Eric and his organization manufactures, and we say, what are all the associated elements that get that flying at the safety level that's required by the FAA?
Thank you, Eric. Keeping talking about infrastructure, of course, we always hear and read a lot about the new aircraft, the model, about the eVTOLs. But one of the key, let's say, enablers is the ground infrastructure, the vertiports. Sylvain, vPorts is working on this. You design, you build, and you operate vertiports. How the infrastructure, what are the key requirements in terms of infrastructure? How they look like, how they integrate in our urban mobility?
Well, the best comparison we can make, you could compare vertiports to heliports. Basically, you need something between 5,000 square meters to up to 15,000 square meters. And it's a small building because people will get onto the eVTOL and go away. So the problem is not the infrastructure. Actually, some challenges depending on the markets. So we're thinking of locations, first of all, in some industrial areas where we have cargo. We're thinking of the market also in terms of healthcare for the transportation of organs or people who have to be rescued. So they have to think of a location close to on the roof of a hospital. And in terms of transportation of people, there are two markets: the regional air mobility, so from one city to another, with the range of the eVTOLs varying between 200 and 300 kilometers. So that's the big advantage, because eVTOLs could fly at a speed of about 250 to 300 kilometers per hour. So within an hour, you cover a distance of 300 kilometers. So that's an advantage for regional air mobility. And then you have to think of those locations of the vertiports for the regional air mobility. The latest market will be the urban air mobility itself. And there are other challenges then, because you have to think of vertiports integrated within the city where people do live. Now, vertiports and eVTOLs have a big advantage compared to helicopters. It's the noise. There's no noise or less noise with eVTOL. So the challenge we have in terms of social acceptability with helicopter is mainly the noise that it provokes, whereas eVTOLs has something between 55 to 70 decibels. So these are another advantage. In terms of infrastructure, basically, it's something similar to a heliport, and it depends on the market where you can locate it, either in the industrial area, or it could be on a commercial mall, or it could be downtown area also.
So we are going to replace our parking in a garden with the vertiports in all the villas.
And there's again, it's not such a big challenge because it's happening, and we can really rapidly establish ourselves on that matter.
Jokes apart, I think that the social acceptance in this has quite a key role. I think that, Patrick, your contribution in a player like vPorts is exactly to help them in let's say, ensure that this is going to happen in a smooth way. What are the key criteria you use? What are the key elements you look at when you have to?
So we're actually super happy to be working with vPorts because it allows us to actually develop this immersive technology around digital twins. So we're actually able to create a 3D model of a city with all of the infrastructure data connected live to that city. So it gives you a 3D dashboard of all the stakeholders before you start making the choice or the decision of where to position the V-ports in relation with electricity infrastructure. We have to consider that these things need to be recharged once in a while. We have to think about urban mobility, bus routes, taxis, shareable bikes and whatnot. You have to think of social acceptability at the sense of if it's an historical neighborhood, maybe you don't necessarily want to put a V-port there, or at least you want to use a tool that is compelling and that's visual enough so that the citizens can say, okay, I see the project, I vote yes, right? So if we provide to the citizens across the world the tool to actually view the project, view the eVTOL to move about, hear the noise with immersive experience, then we're able to go and get the social acceptability of the project before we even start constructing anything. So that's basically what we do with Project Echo over at CAE.
And I read that in the last statistics, social acceptance and advanced air mobility is growing faster. We are at 65%, if I'm not wrong, which is quite impressive for any technology that is quite new. We were discussing with Arnaud about the acceptance of a helicopter, and then there we could open a chapter. But I would focus now more on the funding. All this infrastructure, of course, requires huge funding. I share a couple of numbers about the funding raised so far, and if I'm not wrong, this is mainly at the moment focused on the aircraft. Do we expect a rebalancing? How is the accessibility for funding, Michael, for infrastructure? And what are the drivers of making one investment in this infrastructure viable and sustainable?
Very good. So as an investment bank and as investors in aerospace, we are very excited about the investment prospects for advanced air mobility. Firstly, the infrastructure costs relative to other modes of transportation is really quite low. If you look at a city such as Riyadh or Montreal, the cost to build out ground infrastructure will be in the range of $200 to $300 million US. And that's very affordable when one expects that the revenue forecasts are measured in billions of dollars. For Riyadh, we think the market opportunity is about 7 to 8 billion US. That's the revenue potential ticket sales, if you like. It will grow to that size in about 25 years. And that's plenty of revenue to be able to support payments to bondholders who will finance the infrastructure. And there are really 4 supply chains that you have to think about when investing in this new mode of transportation. The 4 supply chains include, of course, the ground infrastructure, which is a more traditional construction type of infrastructure, but also the air traffic management side of it, because low altitude airspace has to be invested in. We need new systems and capabilities and technologies to ensure the safe separation of eVTOLs from drones, from conventional helicopters, from aircraft, general aviation, that sort of thing. And it's the social acceptability depends on the integrity of these operations. Now, the other supply chains include the helicopter operators, for which we have one right here. The helicopter operators themselves are well equipped to enter into operations with electric vehicles. Helicopter operators are certificated already to fly under let's say, the equivalent of FAA Part 135. But they have safety programs, training programs, pilots. They're all equipped, basically, to be able to do that. And of course, the last supply chain is the vehicles themselves. So when looking at urban areas, as investors, we want to make sure that the business case to put our money to work in infrastructure is well supported by the expected demand, the social acceptability of these new systems in urban areas, because that too is fundamental. And thank goodness these electric vehicles are quiet, because if there was no quiet electric vehicles, there would not be an advanced air mobility market.
Thank you, Michael. So, Captain, it seems that the market is pushing hard. Many operators are ready, and they are very optimistic on the future of advanced air mobility. But of course, we are talking about flying cars. That is not an easy thing to implement, and with a lot of safety implications. How, as a regulator, you are trying to cope with this pressure, because everybody is looking at the regulator. That is the bottleneck now in this hype, and how you are balancing this sustainability with safety, which are the two main pillars of your mandate.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you very much, everybody. I think the voice needs to be raised a little bit. Thank you for asking me. I thought that you're going to forget and not ask me about the subject, and this reflects the reality today, that the industry has a louder voice than the authorities and the regulators, and it is expected and it is usual, because they want to penetrate markets, they want to push investments, and this is how we develop and how the economy moves forward, especially with the new technologies. Allow me to start with talking about a commonly observed mistake, that the relation between the authority or the regulator and the industry is a solid top-down relation, while such model is working very fine in implementing and enforcing of the regulation. However, when it comes to developing and stipulating regulations, it's more than a horizontal and interactive relation between the regulator and the industry. In the last 75 years, states led by the ICAO succeeded in developing regulations as required for the industry to develop, and also for the economics to prosper, and also at the same time achieves the required and acceptable level of safety. Now, over the last 75 years, we learned a lot of lesson learned, and one very solid lesson learned that we've learned from the past experience, that the regulations are never the sole product of a regulator. Rather, it's a collaborative work between the authority and the industry in order to achieve acceptable level of safety, where the investors can play a role and achieve their objectives, especially the business objectives. We in GACA, we realized from early stages that such emerging technologies are becoming reality. So we are working very hard in order to enable the markets to prosper, to develop, and also become one of the leaders in adapting those new technologies in the kingdom. Today we are partnering with NEOM, and its joint venture with the German manufacturer Volocopter in a project that will act as an incubator and a test lab for such technologies, proof of concepts. So where we can, as a regulator, have an access into a reliable data where we can utilize, where we can capitalize in order to develop a regulatory framework that will enable the industry to achieve its objectives, and also at the same time we assure that the acceptable level of safety is achieved.
Thank you, Captain Suleiman. And already I would say that having the regulator sitting in a panel with all the other let's say, stakeholders of the ecosystem is the right concrete signal to the market that this is going to happen. And maybe to this, we have Arnaud here that has created from scratch a company in a sector, and probably even in a traditional, let's say, not innovative, he has experienced what does it mean collaborating with the regulator and facing a lot already of challenges. Is there any lesson learned that we can leverage for the journey that we are going to face in the advanced air mobility? Something that we can replicate?
Sure. The first lessons is that here, after 10 years personally here in Saudi Arabia and dealing with GACA, nothing is impossible. So if I have to recommend a place to invest on the eVTOL and on the air advanced mobility is in Saudi Arabia. Because this is the only place where you can, as you said, sit with your regulator on the same table with the end user, with the operator, with the OEM, and have a common roadmap. This is what we did 3 years back, and we are still doing it, learning from all the obstacles we face. But every time we see an obstacle, we sit together and we see that as just an opportunity to fix it, and that will be just a lesson taken for the air advanced mobility. So once again, this is the place. Not because I am in Saudi Arabia, just because we have the end user with the Giga project. Captain Soiban mentioned NEOM. Usually the customer acceptance will be the most difficult part. Here the customer is pushing us to go quicker. Usually the regulator is a showstopper. Here the regulator is pushing us to be ready quicker. And the operator that we are as THE, new, we can also plan for it right now. So it's the place to be. It's the full ecosystem is ready. So we just work all together. So GACA is a key enabler, definitely.
I think there is the place to be are the word that I would stop this panel. And I would, of course, maybe open the floor for in the few minutes we have left for some questions that I'm sure that the audience may have. And thank you very much for all of you for having us.
Maybe there is some questions.
Sorry? I don't know if there are questions from the audience. We have some microphones available.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm JP. My boss is sitting right opposite me. My question is for the panel. When are we going to engage with ICAO for the regulations that we need to make from the guidance materials and the standards and recommended practices? Are we talking a new annexure, or how are we going to do that? Is there any plans? Is there any way to go forward? Because Captain Suleiman needs to prepare himself for this lot, and he's got to prepare his employees to make sure that he can develop a regulation in line with at least the best practice or the best standards. I'd like to hear from you gentlemen what you think about that.
So, Captain, I think the question is probably for you. If there is a plan for shaping the regulation and ensuring that the advanced air mobility in the kingdom can become reality, starting from certification and all other. Is that the question? No.
Yeah. It is a dilemma for states to develop regulations for such emerging and fast developing technologies. And also one other elements that increasing the complexity of the dilemma is that such technologies does not have the international dimension where ICAO can play a role. It is domestic by nature. So although the ICAO and its panel of experts have done some fantastic work in developing some guidance materials to states where they can incorporate in their national regulation with regards to drone. I believe they developed a manual specifically for the drone, and the panel is continuously working and developing such standards. And I think from that panel of experts, there are some talks and studies about the urban air mobility concept, which is, if we talk about the concept of traffic management, goes under the unmanned traffic management, the UTM concept. This is basically what ICAO role is for the time being. But I believe it's going to be evolved when such technologies or the new modes of air mobility integrates more with the international air transportation.
And maybe, if I may add, on the technology side of it, the spectrum is really wide. Right now, there are more than 150 companies chasing to be the first one to certify the aircraft. Most of them are going, and I'm talking on the FAA standard, but Part 23 and Part 25, which is the aircraft and standard certification path. In our case, we are at the other end. We will be certifying under Part 29, which is the rotorcraft certification. So there will be not many amendments to it. So that makes it a lot easier. That's on the manufacturing aspect of it. On the operation side, also of the business, we will be using, we could use tomorrow Part 135 operators path, because we will be considered as a helicopter. So we will be able to use helipad as they are today. We need to bring the charging aspect of it, but I think in terms of the authorities, we will also be an enabler to test some of the other components of the ecosystem, because most of the companies will be facing challenges going through certification because of the safety requirement. And one good example is the fact that if you lose full power on these kind of aircraft, some of them have a configuration where they don't fly. They are flying because of the motor, but they don't glide. So this will be a challenge, because you either use ballistic parachute to be able to control the descent or nothing. So that will be hard. In our case, we have a main rotor, so we can fall into auto rotation like a helicopter. So full collective down, we auto rotate, and we have a fixed wing, so we can also glide. So that will make it also easier to introduce it to the market. So the spectrum is going to be very wide, I think.
I don't know if there is a couple of questions, one here and one there.
A very good afternoon. It has been a very nice panel, and to see this AM coming up. My question is, have two parts. One is that this eVTOL is a very wide of flying equipment, starting from vertical takeoff to fixed wing also. So how the vertiports are going to cater for this variety of the eVTOLs to handle into the urban, particularly into the urban cities where we have a limitation of place?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. How the vertiports will what?
How the vertiport will take care of this variety of the eVTOLs to be handled at the same character.
Somebody, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can go first. Well, at the vertiport level, it will be essentially, a landing pad is a landing pad. There's a certain diameter, for one thing. But then all the services to these various devices might be slightly different from one manufacturer to another. Charging time, space to actually park the device, maybe some punctual maintenance, at certain level. So this will be part of the numerous challenges that we'll see emerge. Yeah. And did you want to?
Want to go on, Michael? Or
Well, a couple of points I think I would make just as an investor. One is that we want to invest in vertiports that can support a number of different operators, which means also a number of different vehicles. So we like the public concept, public vertiport concept. There are companies like Joby who would like to build and control infrastructure in cities so that only their vehicles can access these new facilities. And if that's the case, we're not an investor in those. We want to see very smart vertiport design that is capable of recharging, perhaps also refueling with hydrogen vehicles that are hybrid vehicles. And so there's a lot of care that has to go into the, it's not just a heliport. These are very sophisticated platforms. There's a lot of technology. The air traffic control side of it is very important as well. Being able to land an eVTOL with great precision and care requires that there be radio navigation beacons installed at or close to the vertiport. So it's a very complex, multi-system, multi-integration challenge that impacts the attractiveness from an investment standpoint, as well as safety and other factors.
Thank you, Michael. I think there was another question here.
Hello, everyone. This is Mohammed. Thank you very much for this great panel. I actually have, I actually have a quick question about the pilot license requirements. I'm not sure which questions goes to who exactly.
You
maybe
ask.
Patrick?
We will allocate.
Yeah. So is it going to be tough, or I may phrase it, is it going to be the same as if someone would like to get his commercial pilot license in terms of the flying hours, in terms of the experiences or any additional degree?
Yeah, maybe. Go ahead. But the requirement in terms of hours will be around 250 hours to be able to be certified. The complexity, I'm a helicopter pilot, and I can tell you that this is not an easy toy to play with. You know, you always have collective cyclic and the pedals at the same time. This kind of aircraft will be much, much easier to handle and to pilot, especially in hovering. Hovering a typical helicopter, and the smaller it is, the more difficult, you know, to maintain stability. These aircraft will be really a lot more easy to stay, to have in a stable position. You won't have 3 commands at the same time and function that would change if you are hovering and translation. So that will make it a lot easier. But still, it's going to be a challenge to train that many people because you cannot bypass any steps. So if you need to make these 250 hours, you know, you will have to be trained. Will we take people from the helicopter pool of pilots or aircraft pilots? That we don't know. It will depend, but we foresee that in the first few years, we will probably drain a few helicopter pilots down to that activity. But at the end of the day, you know, it's also going to be a question of who will be interested in flying these. It's a lot of work. It's commuting a lot. We see that, you know, there is a big shortage in pilots today. You know, a lot of pilots are, you know, being looked at. So it's even if it's easier, it's still going to be a challenge.
I would like to add also, it is foreseeable that some of the tasks that current pilots are going through as modern pilots will be eventually will evolve using artificial intelligence to actually support and make it a lot easier. If you think of the early drones versus the drones that you can buy now, there's so much assistance, you know, that the drones are stabilizing or self-stabilizing in the case of winds and whatnot. So it is foreseeable to expect that in the midterm, you know, as we move forward. However, it will require, though, that the regulator be flexible in at some point reducing the number of hours required by the pilot, because now the technology will be there to assist the pilot.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may comment, the last comment, and I'm sure that the industry is targeting a pilotless aircraft, but this cannot happen over time. We need reliable performance data that shows that those aircraft will fly with the at least same acceptable level of safety that we are achieved today with the piloted aircrafts. Then with a phased approach, by the end of the decade, of the current decade expected, that we will allow the pilotless aircraft to be operated, whether VTOLs or others. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we finish our time, and maybe one last question. If well, I see many. Let's keep this one question here.
And I think the pilot and pilotless
at one
aircraft
point
motivated people to talk.
Hi, good afternoon. A simple question. Economy of scale for such urban air mobility. How much it would cost for individuals like us to buy one unit?
Michael, you want to take that?
I can answer that. Well, I can estimate that. Initially, the ticket costs will be somewhat high. And part of the reason for that is that regional air mobility is likely to be one of the early use cases. So regional air mobility as opposed to air taxi, different. Regional air mobility, air taxi. So we think that the price of tickets for the first few years of operations will be a few $100s US. And as time goes on, as more and more vehicles come online, more vertiports are established, volumes increase, the price should come down to that of an Uber. So if you have Uber in this town or not, you get the idea though. You should be able to go from point A to point B for $50, $100, something like that.
Michael, maybe I misunderstood the question. Did you ask what is the price of the eVTOL device itself, or the price of a ride?
Yeah.
Price of the unit. Price of the
I misheard.
eVTOL.
Yeah, that I can probably tell you the average. It's going to be between 1.5 and 2 million per unit. If I take the overall spectrum of what ours is going to be cheaper, but the objective also in terms of operation and is to get down to something between $2 to $4 per mile per passenger. So that comes exactly to the Uber analogy. But you know, typically an aircraft would cost between 1.5 and 2 million.
$1 a kilometer.
Canadian dollars, so it's really cheap.
I think there was another question there. And we have, I think, time for just one question, one last question. I see the timekeepers waving to me.
And where is the mic?
Can you give the microphone, please? There.
Hi.
I will give you.
Over here. So my name is Abdurrahman Amri, NEOM Vertical Air Mobility. Just my question directed to you, Mr. Patrick. You mentioned something about investment, $1 billion.
Yes.
Which is a huge investment in pilot training.
Yes.
My question actually, okay, what are the curriculum that you are developing? Is it something you are building on current helicopter pilot curriculum, or is it something combined with unmanned aircraft system, remotely piloting, you know,
yes. So
training as well?
So to answer that, it's a 5-year program that the government is funding. It's essentially to create immersive training technology, as well as new simulators to be able to train pilots. So at this point, we don't have the requirements, the specific requirements for the length of time, the duration, or the training path for each student, but we're actually building all the hardware and software tools and enablers around that training.
Is it going to be like on a national level or international level?
That's a great question.
IFR
It's a great question.
operations, VFR
I think we'll have to tag along with the large regulating organizations. So ICAO, FAA, European as well, and GACA clearly.
How about NEOM?
About who?
NEOM.
Yes, absolutely. We'd be more than happy to actually open a training center.
All right, thank you very much.
So last question, I promise there.
This question is for the manufacturers. What is the level of standardization between different equipments? Like, for example, instead of having charging ports, what about swapping the batteries? So when the equipment lands, you can just swap the batteries. So what is the percentage of standardization?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that right now, there are a lot of people that are going through the technology development, and I think that most of the companies are not competing against each other. I think that right now we're trying to make the technology evolve. I spent the week last week with the Joby people. I was with Volocopter last week also. So everybody is working toward trying to establish a standard. Some of the company are more vertically integrated. So like you mentioned, Joby is doing everything from A to Z. And some others are more integrator, like we are. So there are no standards right now, but we can say that, in terms of battery consumption, for example, that will range from current battery, automotive battery available today, so 175 watt-hour per kilo, up to 300. So there is no standardization in that sense because they don't use the same power. But eventually, the charging devices that will standardize through time. But at this point, everybody is just trying to piggyback on what's being developed, and we don't want to work in an enclosed, kind of approach because we will eventually not meet the target because this is coming. We didn't talk much about the introduction time, but it's coming in 20. Some of the competitors are promoting 2025, 2024. We realistically think that this will not happen before 2026. So we still have a few years still to standardize, but there is not much. On the charging side, for example, we will go with induction charging. So some people will go with battery swapping. So it will come eventually, but nothing at this point.
Thank you, Eric. I need to stop here. And I want to really thank you, this amazing panel, for being here for their time. I know that you are going to be around. Probably, if there are some other questions, you can take the opportunity. And thank you all for the attention and to being here.
Bravo.
and welcome to the Air Cargo and Logistics gate. I promise you we will not change the gate like airports do, and we will not delay this flight, hopefully. And we will start with, allow me to introduce Engineer Sulaiman Al-Mazrou, the CEO of the National Industrial and Logistics Development Program, as known as NIDLIP, for the opening statement for our gate.
Honorable guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's my great pleasure to be here in such an important forum, such amazing delegates. My special thanks goes to General Authority of Civil Aviation for organizing such an important event. A Roman philosopher once said, "There is no favorable winds for those with no direction." There is no favorable winds for those with no directions. I'm sorry to capture this metaphor from the maritime industry, but I think there was no Roman philosopher when the aviation started. But seriously, the meaning of having the right direction, the right vision, is an important matter. And I will quote, "All success stories start with a vision, and successful visions are based on strong pillars." These brief words by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, explain what Saudi Vision 2030 is all about. And we are lucky that Vision 2030 provides us with a clear roadmap to transform the kingdom into prosperous nation and vibrant society and thriving economy. The National Industrial Development and Logistics Program is a great example of the impact created by this great vision. NIDLIP, for short, integrates the key sector of mining, industry, logistics, and energy via more than 300 game-changing initiatives. This event is one of them. To achieve clear and well-defined goals and targets, including improvement of local, regional, and international connectivity of trades and transport networks, transforming the kingdom to global logistics hub, and unlocking the potential of promising industry, such as aviation. And we have no doubt in our ability to achieve that ambition goal. This level of confidence is based on facts. In the 5 years past since 2030 Vision was launched, we started to enjoy the fruited spears across all aspects of our lives. The contribution of non-oil sector in the GDP grows to 59%, reducing our dependency on oil. Foreign direct investment has been tripled. Private sector contribution into GDP was doubled. Saudi Arabia ranked economy the second among the G20 in the third and fourth quarter of last year. We also ranked the second in the digital competitiveness among the G20 countries. Number of factories grows about 50% in the few years, from 7,000 to 10,200. The time required to establish and register a company reduced from 15 days to less than 30 minutes. Participation of women in the labor force was doubled from 19% to 33%. The kingdom comes second globally in COVID resilience and recovery. These are just some of many transformational success stories that we had achieved in Saudi Arabia since the launch of Vision 2030 and its programs, proving Saudi ability to achieve its ambition goals. And I am sure that transportation and logistics sector, including aviation, wouldn't be any different. At NIDLIB, we're proud to be investor-centric program that cater for both international and local investors and work through the fundamentals of risk and return, minimizing the risk and maximizing the return to the investor in a sustainable way. And according to that, our 300 initiatives offers a well-developed infrastructure, including digital infrastructure and plug-and-play value parks, enabling regulations that provide sustainable business environments, available of resources that include metallic, non-metallic, raw material, skilled and qualified human capital, and world-class research centers. And finally, access to local and international markets through state-of-art multi-mode logistical hubs, local offtakes, optimized routes, and international trade agreements. A few months ago, the National Transport and Logistics Strategy was launched. Entails with more mega projects to scale our infrastructure and provide high-quality services. Today, the Aviation strategy was launched. The Aviation strategy that linked to our national transportation strategy, that linked to NIDLIB strategy, that linked to the vision. This is how the roadmap is linked all over the vision sectors. And with the power of integration of these sectors, energy, industry, mining, and logistics, and with the power of the fourth industrial revolution, we will have a smart mine connected to a smart factory that's connected in a smart industrial city that's powered by a smart grid and moving goods and services through smart multi-mode hubs. These hubs will achieve to us a clean energy, shortest routes, and optimal delivery means, on-demand manufacturing, and all of which will achieve the required transition to cleaner, more productive network of services. The Saudi Vision 2030 positive impact is not limited to Saudi Arabia. Becoming an industrial powerhouse and global logistic hub will open new possibilities and new opportunities of products and markets, improve the connectivity between continents, and enhance the international trades. Therefore, we continue to invite the international community to be part of our journey toward creating prosperous future for human around the world. And I look forward to listening to upcoming panel because they are the experts in that area. And thank you for having me.
And now with our panelists, we'll start with Mr. Tidi Zibitz, CEO of Saudi Cargo, Faisal Al-Badah, CEO of Saudi Arabian Logistics, Brian Cassidy, Director of Supply and Demand of Apple, Loy Mash'abi, Deputy Minister of Logistics Services at the Ministry of Transport and Logistics. And finally, Awad Al-Salami, VP of Air Cargo and Logistics at GACA. Please. But before we start, one question to the audience. Please prepare one question that you feel is the biggest question for the sector for 2022. We'll take it at the end of the session. So I'm glad to have those gems here with me. We have the whole sector here. So if you have any problem with the sector, you have them all here. We have the airline, the ground handler, the supply chain owner, the policy maker, and the regulator. We'll start with Teddy. So COVID changed the industry. The rates changed, the need for air cargo changed, the mix of the aircraft, the requirements for the mix of the aircraft changed, the capacities changed, and so on. So what's the outlook for the industry? And do we expect the industry to react in a better way, and God forbid another pandemic comes anytime far away from today? And do we expect, because of the recent changes and the supply chain, how they got reconfigured, do we expect new markets for the air cargo?
Okay, thank you very much, Saror. I think that many of us have already forgotten the start of the pandemic. We didn't have many months to prepare ourselves for that situation. It only took into the winter of 2019, but by the 11th of March, when the pandemic was called in 2020, we had a completely new situation. 50% or more of the capacity was gone in the industry overnight, and the sector had to adapt to that situation, bringing in goods to society and customers on an effective and efficient way. And I think that the sector really stepped up to the plate, delivering pharmaceuticals and food and machinery and e-commerce to society and the public in a fairly effective way given the situation that we had. So what we have learned from our point of view in Saudi Cargo is that we can actually do monumental things in a very short period of time. But not least that the ecosystem, the ground handlers, the airports and the airlines and the customers need to find solutions whereby we can serve society and customers effectively. And I hope, this is a hope, that we can continue down that path of finding solutions as an ecosystem. Why would we operate anywhere in the world within 12 to 24 hours and connect continents, and then the cargo standing on the ground for weeks? It doesn't make any sense. So we should really use this opportunity that we have learned over the past 2 years to continue finding solutions for our customers and society. That's what I hope for. That's what we are working for.
Good. New markets?
Yes, we are starting new markets. We are looking at new markets constantly, but we are also looking at new customer segments and growing customer segments. I just want to mention something that is probably known by many of you, but e-commerce. E-commerce have doubled over the past 4 years and will add another 50% to its volume in the next 4 years. That puts a lot of positive pressure on all the actors, not least us. If the customer needs their goods within 72 hours anywhere in the world, it puts on a positive pressure to deliver that type of promise, and we are very excited about that. That is, of course, primarily in Asia, China, US, and parts of Europe, but there are also other customer segments that we are focusing on, which will then open new destinations for us in the coming years.
Thank you, Teddy. Faisal, digital is not a new word anymore in our life, but our sector is not the most digitized sector yet globally. And we have seen some development in the past 2 years, the way we place bookings, the way we track our cargo, and so on. How do you expect digitization will impact the air cargo and logistics sector in relation to efficiency and new business models? And do you see more and more sectors joining the air cargo customer base?
Thank you very much. Today we live in a very disrupted supply chain due to the COVID-19 pandemic and many other reasons. the demand from the customers has changed now from literally just in time to just in case. So their demand requirements now is changing. They're demanding end-to-end support to design their supply chain. They demand now a direct on-time access to capacity so they can avoid delays with what's happening now in the supply chain disruption. And they also want instant track and trace of every step of their supply chain. Digitization will definitely be a main enabler to do this. According to data from the WEF, World Economic Forum, out of the investment, 1.5 trillion of the investment allocated to logistics by 2025 will be in digitization. So that's huge. And there are so many other multinational companies that already pledged multi-billion-dollar investments by 2025. So with digitization, there are three things that we need to watch, actually, as a result. Number one is enabling a seamless, holistic, integrated supply chain. What is it for the service provider? Service provider now, they want to use the technology to break the wall between domestic transportation, international transportation, and their contract logistics. They want to manage their procurement every step of the way and their sales also every step of the way just to increase efficiency. And we're seeing a multinational shipping line acquiring freighter because they want to get into the end-to-end solutions. Customers, they want somebody to design end-to-end solutions for them every step of the way. Number two is the automation and digitization of the operation must be taken to the next level. Example, warehousing. Warehousing today is only reduced labor. The future warehousing will be shared warehouses, multiple owners, multiple formats, with a dynamic inventory led by artificial intelligence. You want to have a dynamic pricing rather than a fixed pricing. Same thing with the transportation. You want to actually have them fully integrated through digital platforms, combine their purchasing power so they can have dynamic pricing rather than flat ones. The last thing, which is the most important thing, data. Data is gold. And now with what's happening in the world, we're seeing actually openness from both customers and their service provider to actually share more data. Because customers, they want to know exactly the capacity of their service provider. Service provider, they want to know everything about their customers so they can actually project what's happening, give them also better service. Definitely artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain will play a major role actually into the data managers.
Thank you. Moving to Brian, to the supply chain owner side. So consumers are demanding. They want the phone before it's launched, and they want the other new phone before it's launched. And the competition is fierce in the high-tech world, and your supply chains are running against time, I guess. So how is your demand impacting air cargo? And do you expect new products and new solutions from the air cargo sector? Question one. And question two, what happened in the past 2 years with the demands coming from the consumers and your supply chain? How is Apple adapting to a more resilient supply chain?
Yeah. I think we all up here on the panel have just lived through the most crazy 3 years, 2 years certainly of our lives. So if I look at my sector, which is technology devices, phones, tablets, that type of thing, like demand has been off the charts. And that is something that we didn't anticipate, but as everybody had to stay home, obviously everybody needed devices to work, devices for entertainment, devices so that we could all stay in contact. Now, at the same time that this happened, Teddy was dealing with a different challenge, and we lost about 50% of the global capacity, because 50% of air cargo was flying in the belly of passenger planes. Those passenger planes weren't flying anymore. So the demand increased, but the supply reduced. And the fact that the supply demand increased and the supply reduced, it meant we didn't have the ability to build buffers of inventory around the world. So just in time, as Faisal was saying, became more and more important. Okay, some of the things that I see that have changed that aren't going back again. One of the things Teddy talked about, consumers have moved to .com. Consumers don't always want to go into a shop anymore. They've become familiar with ordering online. That is going to continue. We see in most of my European and Middle Eastern region, we see that most of retail is back open again, but we're still transacting a much higher level of demand through .com than we did in 2019. So that market switch hasn't gone away. The other radical one that has changed is we're not moving product anymore in the belly of passenger planes because the passenger plane capacity isn't predictable enough for us anymore. And in the same way that the .com business isn't going back into the shop, I think a lot of air cargo and logistics is going to be based on freighters and people who have the vision and resource to invest in their freighter network. So those are two things. So we're in a very interesting period. We've come through 2 years, but things are not going to go back to normal. And people with the vision, like the vision that was talked about here in the introduction, I believe they're the people who are going to be successful.
Thank you. Going back to Teddy, after we heard Brian's demands, we expect more freighters in the mix in Saudi and others?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. If you look back before 2019 and before, 50% of the industry's capacity and revenues were stemming from belly capacity, and that will not happen going forward. Over the next decade, you will see a mix rather around 30 to 70%, where 70% will be on freighters. And therefore, we need as an industry to find out how we can add more freighters as capacity to satisfy the customers, because that's what it's all about. And we are looking at that, and the entire industry is working with that. And I can see some familiar faces from some of the OEMs, the Boeings and the Airbuses here, which are also now, after a break where they didn't produce that many freighters, are now going back and offering freighter products. And that is, of course, something that we need to discuss with these, but also with the customers. Because as Faisal is saying, it's not only about the hardware, it's also about the software. So how can we develop that so we get real-time tracking, like we do for some of the e-commerce operators, real-time tracking all the way to the system. So it's not only the hardware, it's also the software that needs to be developed. And that's the type of discussions we already have with Boeing and others on how we can develop that as an airline.
Thank you. Faisal, so demands are changing, whether from the airlines or from supply chain owners. So how the ground handlers and the ecosystem, the agencies present in the airport are adapting to these new requirements?
Well, if we look at logistics, basically, it's all about time and cost. So if you provide less time, high cost, that's a surface. If you provide less cost, high time, that's still a surface. If you provide less time and less cost, that's a solution that's win-win to everybody. So basically, how do we adapt to this? Is by becoming efficient. Efficiency is the name of the game. Digitization, automation, track and trace, and most important thing, the human capital. You can't get the best digital tools in the world, automation, if you don't have the right human capitals to operate those with the efficient mindset, understanding the client's need. The clients basically at the end of the day, they have a P&L. They want their P&L to be healthy. If their P&L is healthy, they're going to invest more in these digitization, automation. So the name of the game is efficiency, understanding the client's needs, to do. Sometimes we have to do tailor-made, even for ground handling. This is what we're doing today. We're doing specific handling for specific, like pharma, perishable. So we have people understanding the pharma business. They are focusing on the pharma business. So when we get shipments for pharma, there are people only understanding pharma. So it's all about really understanding the client's need, doing it in an efficient way, and pretty much P&L-driven matter.
Thank you. Now, before the session, me and Brian, we were discussing that the sector is moving from I want my cargo to be on the shelf quick, I want my cargo to be on hand quick to the clients. Faisal mentioned that companies are integrating now backwards and vertically. So we have seen Maersk adding additional aircraft to their fleet, Kühne Nagel acquiring a company heavy with air freight, CMA CGM starting an airline, and so on. So the business model is changing. Going to Lu'ay and the plans for Saudi. So Saudi has a unique location, a very ambitious plan mentioned by Suleiman. So what is Saudi doing to increase the air cargo footprint, to utilize the unique location it has? And what are the opportunities to integrate the multimodal infrastructure we have today in Saudi? We have the longest stretch of coast. We have 3 major seaports in the region. We have 2 hubs in the country. We have Teddy. So, floor is yours.
I think, Surur, you said it yourself, I think the integration, the vertical, horizontal, diagonal integration happening in the logistics sector kind of forced us in the government to look into how to regulate that in a different way as well. And one way of trying to answer that question is what we've established is a deputyship in charge of logistics sector, cargo end-to-end. It's no longer committees that are trying to connect sea to air to land to rail, but rather a body that is in charge of that. And it's a stepping stone is a deputyship. That is the stepping stone towards an authority for logistics sector, because we see how important it is. So that is one challenge that we need to look at, and why the deputyship was established to try to solve. But there is another trend that is also interesting, and some other panels today touched based on that, which is the innovation and how fast these integrations are allowing different products and services to come out. And I don't think we're anywhere near a mature logistic market today. It's changing quite drastically. If you see how drones are deployed in Ethiopia, it's completely different than how drones are deployed in the US. The way Ethiopia regulates drones is completely different. And the private sector and the government sector are trying to figure out what is the most optimal to each segment or each country or each region, even in that domain. So we're integrating as government to try to regulate that in a more efficient way and look at end-to-end and integrate that in a more efficient way. But B, we need to create incubators where innovators can try experimenting new things. And this is where there are different models. So we're launching 59 logistic zones, and the private sector will only deal with the zone operator or zone regulator, and he will be the front face instead of 10 different other entities that they need to deal with. So that's expediting. But we're going an extra step where we have NEOM, for example, where it's really completely cutting edge innovation of trying to have autonomous vehicles integrated with drones or what have you. And to me, NEOM is like the NASA or like even the military of the US, where you found many innovations started there, but then they trickled back down to the base economy. We're experimenting in NEOM a lot. It's quite expensive there. But I'm telling you, a lot of the things we experiment there will find their way back to base economy, and then this integrated government can deal with it and regulate it better. So that's the second way we can help kind of incubate these innovations and what have you. I think the third point Teddy touched base on. It is really saddening to see how the sea freighters, the lack of capacity, how it slowed global economy. It's serious. And we are not far away in air cargo from that point. 50% of freighter capacity will go out of service in the next decade. Can Boeing build planes enough? Can we buy those planes enough? Can we convert more planes fast enough? Is this sustainable? Is the capex available? these are questions that governments have to look at, not only private sector. And we are lucky in this country that we have this constant dialogue between private sector and consumers and government where we're trying to solve this. And we have the vehicles through vision realization programs such as NIDLIB or PIF as a financer where we're trying to put really radical solutions to serious problems in a sector that really enables everything else to either grow or shrink.
Great. So going back to Brian, so we heard vision plans. We have heard His Excellency, the President of GAC, in the morning mentioning a new special economic zone in Saudi. So what plans Apple has for Saudi and the region and to utilize the unique location of Saudi?
Yeah. Okay, you're going to have to stop me when my time is up on this one because
you have all the time.
There are so many opportunities, and we're really excited. We're particularly excited that the government has been so thoughtful about how you plan logistics. It's air cargo and logistics, and as Teddy said, probably the smallest time that product is moving from A to B is actually when it's in the air. So you need to be really efficient at getting it off the aircraft. You need to be really efficient moving it through your supply chain. I have wanted for a number of years to have a distribution center here in KSA. For me, owning the supply chain, the distribution center is the heart of the supply chain because I don't want my customers in KSA or elsewhere to wait 72 hours. I want them to get their product same day or absolutely latest next day. So we are opening within your integrated logistics and business zone. We're happy now to be opening our new DC. And we've gone about this in a very thoughtful way. And many thanks for the investment that you've put into systems to help clear product through the supply chain in an absolute state-of-the-art, fast way that can compete with any other country in the world, or not only compete, be even faster. That gets us closer to our customer, and we can produce better customer service. You asked, though, about what developments and what opportunities I would see. I look at KSA and I look at the globe. And from a lot of the market that I service, which is Western Europe, you're right between where a lot of my manufacturing is done in the Far East and where a lot of my customers are in Europe. This should be a major logistical hub. It has all of the advantages. And one of the key advantages is I think you have a huge opportunity to marry sea freight coming from the Far East, take it off the boat in Jeddah, and Teddy can get it quickly into my market. All of a sudden, we have reduced emissions by half. And there's a lot of talk about what we can do. That is a huge opportunity that I believe KSA is in the unique position with the vision that I've heard about to be able to deliver on. You know?
Well, that's great news. This deserves a round of applause. Well, congrats for Apple on starting the DC, and congrats for the country for having your DC in the first special economic zone in the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to Awad. So we have heard the plans, we have heard what the supply chain owner wants on their plan. So going back to your arena and air cargo and regulating the sector to improve the sector. We have lots of competition in the region. We have lots of demands and we have lots of plans. So what do you expect the enablers that would require the sector to prosper in the future? And what plans currently we have in Saudi to remove the roadblocks today we have?
Right. That's a very extensive question. And first of all, I would like to thank the forum for putting this value chain together because it's very unique, actually. If we were in a meeting room, we'll be at each other's throats, I would say. And usually the supply chain owner will win the argument, but it's a lovely composition, and I'm truly glad to be here. Well, speaking about the enablers, I cannot compose of being a very expert in air cargo, and I'm very passionate about it. I have to limit it to certain things. First one is very sentiment, which is focus on the sector itself. Post-COVID, it's been an eye-opener to a lot of non-logisticians in the industry. In terms of movement, in terms of just-in-time, in terms of goods, and you rightfully mentioned that the whole concept has changed from off the shelf to the consumer. Usually the industrialists like Teddy Zebitz and Faisal Bidah, post-curbside, that's beyond us. We don't care about it. But air cargo volume is less than 1% in the world, but represents 35% of value. So that's medicine, that's just-in-time logistics for manufacturer, that's electronics, that's a very high product, which I urge everyone in the ecosystem, from the AKO to the handler to the courier operator, to always think air cargo, because whenever we go to the industry, the 99% goes to the passenger. Those passenger needs this volume to be fed in. I don't want to be shrewd in that statement, but I have to move on to the practical enablers. The second practical enabler, which I can compose it globally, which is digitization. There is a massive change in the industry. And that's why the Al-Bazid, which Brian mentioned, it's integrated logistics. And we were very keen on having this integrated, from the O&M at the original station, to the ground handlers, to the zone itself, to beyond the zone, to the importer of record, like the big freight forwarders. And the whole integration is key, and digitization, it's immense for such an industry. We have a complex ecosystem. We have recommendation from IATA on digitization and cargo IQ. We have the UPU on the mail side that's actually on a different level. We have the courier integrator like the FedEx and the UPS and all of that. So at some point, all of this need to be clustered together and talk to each other from a digital standpoint for the sake of the consumer and for the sake of the supply chain owner, which they own the product. The third element of enabler, which I think it's highly needed, is connectivity. And as Teddy rightfully mentioned, it's getting very, very difficult. And Brian rightfully mentioned the capacity is getting reduced. I'm sure in the other panel they're talking about going to 321 to anti-cargo capacity, which is impacting the volume flow of the industry. And connectivity is key that we don't force, but we suggest that carriers change their way of having more interline. The intermode connectivity, it's highly needed from sea to air to land and so on. And not only a private sector role, it's all the government role that they interlink all of this together. You go to Africa, it's one of the biggest issues, that connectivity for passengers themselves, going from Accra to Lagos, for example. That's 75 hours connection. So cargo is facing the same thing when it comes to connectivity. So I would say three main elements as an enabler. First one is sentimental, is coming from my end, which is more acknowledgement and focus and involvement in the bigger picture from all angles, digitization and connectivity.
Thank you. And just a note, Suleiman mentioned that this event is an initiative. We have two other initiatives here. So a year ago, Luay's deputyship and Awa's deputyship didn't exist. And part of the change, of course, now we have them both of us here. Do you have anything to add? Anyone?
And I didn't answer the second question, I'm sorry, regarding the roadblocks, because I don't think we have roadblocks in our industry. We're just upgrading ourselves to the second point. So if I'm going to phrase a roadblock, but I don't think it exists, I would say three main elements. The first one is legislative, which a lot of people think it's the easiest part, but it's a very important part, which is defining the responsibility, the technical aspect, and the commercial aspect to control the whole sector. The second one, it's capacity and outreach. We need to reach 255 destinations, more trade lanes to the kingdom, which it's not a roadblock right now, it doesn't exist, but we will reach there, and there is a plan, and it's under execution. The third one is infrastructure. And the Al-Bazid is a big example of having the product that didn't exist. So basically, a big part of our ratio, import to export, is 1 to 10, that this product didn't exist. Now, with this product existence in Saudi, this gap will be bridged between importation to exportation. Actually, it won't be called a roadblock anymore. So that's answering your second question.
Great answer. Going back to our audience,
there's one point I'd like to add. If you have the best infrastructure in the world, everything, if you have players actually, operating this very efficient, then there is something missing. So basically what we need now is a national logistic champions that can lift up the quality of the service provider. Three-party logistics, as you all know, is very headache. You deal with multiple service provider. Me as a customer, any customer would like to have one company that can do all for them. So there is highly needed 4PLs more than 3PLs. A 4PL will hire multiple 3PLs. So the 4PL will act as the national logistic champions. If there's a big mega project, you have the option to hire 30 service providers. That's headache, admin, etc. If you can find somebody that you can hire, and that somebody will hire those 30 multiple service providers, and that would be the right model, because one of the issues with 3PLs is basically receivable. They have to pay for their services, probably sometimes even cash, but they don't get paid immediately. At some point, their working capital will be highly affected, and they will suffer a lot. If you have a big players, and they can actually accommodate longer credit facilities, and they can literally support these small players and pay them on time, then you will have a very healthy logistic industry. So it's all about main players supporting the small ones and working in very integrated model.
Sure. Yeah, and just to build a little bit on what Faisal is saying, we have been very good now to make a lot of business cases on building hardware and buying airplanes and so on. Now we need to step up the investments also in skill sets, university degrees and bachelor degrees in logistics and so on. We need to improve our skill sets in order for us to accelerate into this space. So not only hardware, but also a lot of software to match the investments.
Can I comment on that? Because again, I cannot compose all the enablers, and that building capability is one of the main one, and Teddy rightly mentioned. So if I can just add as a fourth one, the question was very general. The enabler is cross-functional, and it's everywhere. So capability is a big part. So thank you, Teddy, for mentioning that.
Thank you. Going back to the audience, do you have any questions? The big question you have for this year? تفضل, we have someone in the back.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Abdul Khaliq Al-Hajri. I just have one question about the SMEs, small company and medium company. How is it going to affect in logistic? How is it going to impact in logistic plan in our area?
Would like to take it? Eloy?
If I may, I think there are two big elements that SMEs are playing today very well. In Saudi particularly, in many of the smaller cities and smaller towns, bigger from Riyadh, Dammam, and Jeddah, where you're finding smaller companies providing higher service, higher quality, and then they become the distribution arm of the bigger players that do not want to invest heavily into these smaller towns. A big example of that is Safola. Safola, their distribution in Saudi Arabia, only the 3 cities they distribute. Everywhere else, they hire warehouses and delivery companies from individuals, not even big companies. So there is a massive move towards e-commerce and better services in every town in Saudi. I remember Fetcher, when they opened in Saudi Arabia, 19 warehouses, 16 of which in smaller towns, because these are the ones that are buying from Shein and Jolly Chick, and they don't have bigger shopping malls and what have you. So there is one big role for SMEs in the development and the distribution from the big distribution areas to the smaller towns. The other one is innovation. SMEs are much faster in experimenting new operating models or new software than the bigger companies are. And you find many bigger companies acquiring the interesting concepts, and then they add the width and breadth they have to kind of support it grow. This is very active in the logistics sector globally, even regionally.
Thank you.
We still have time for 2 more questions. Or 1 more question. Amr? Here.
اللي بيجيك.
So, question leveraging what Ustad Faisal and Teddy were just mentioning regarding the human capital investment and the skills needed. How far, especially with Saudi Arabia, do you see is that gap being on where we are today and where it needs to be tomorrow? And if you can elaborate on that.
Well, being a lecturer at a university in logistics, I can say that we are not that far away, but that has more to do with other countries, also a lack of logistics development and education. But we have to have programs in place. We need, as a private sector, to team up with universities and institutions to build these programs so that they have relevance for the industry, not only for us, but also for other sectors. So we are trying to do that. How far we are away on a scale from 1 to 10, I don't want to get into that. But we need to start that right now. We need to put a lot of effort and investment into this scene as soon as possible.
So if I may, on top of the academic support is also the on-the-job training, because you go to school, you will study so many things. If you don't go into the right job, then you're not going to be able to practice it. So now with the launch of the Logistic Academy, now students, they go there with actually getting a job. So they literally have their program mainly on the job training. And that will support them a lot to bridge the gap between what the human capital requirements. But there was also another thing. Every single logistic company should look after their employees, change manage it from within. If you bring digitization, you have to actually focus on your employees, make sure they understand all these tools. Don't bring just people from outside and they fix it for them. This is the real investment. At the end of the day, if you train them on these digitization, bridge the gap between their knowledge on what the market needs. Let's assume at the end of the day, they go to someone else. Okay, they will benefit that someone else. And then in the future, they'll come back to you or they will go to somewhere else. So basically, you start from within. We at SAL, we have 1,000 employees, and our focus now is to level up their capabilities in terms of automation and digitization. And that's the real human capital that we should focus on.
Yeah. If I may, just on that point, I think globally we are dealing with talent shortages in various areas. And this affects lots of countries in Europe, lots of countries in, say, in the United States, worldwide. Recently I've been recruiting here as we expand our capability. I've been blown away by the talent that has come forward that is interested in participating. So one of the opportunities maybe is to publicize more the talent that you do have within KSA. But people are probably your most important thing in the supply chain. You've got location is really important, and you have a super location. You have capacity, and you have the power to invest in capacity. And the investment you're doing in people is really important as well, and it shows. It shows.
Thank you all. Unfortunately, our time is over, but I would ask my esteemed guests, please, if you could be around, because we still have more questions. Thank you all. And thanks for the attendees. Thank you.
Thank you.